Hi, my name is Pritish Das. In this video, I will take you through Oracle's rapid implementation spreadsheet. Oracle has provided a spreadsheet approach to uploading the chart of accounts, legal entities, ledgers, and business units into Oracle Fusion applications. So this video will give you an insight as to how to go about using the spreadsheet for that purpose. So the first thing to do is to download a blank spreadsheet. In order to do that, first you log into the Fusion applications, then navigate to Setup and Maintenance. Once you get to Setup and Maintenance, what you do is from the task list on the right, click on Search and enter the task, create chart of accounts, and search for this task. The full task is create chart of accounts, ledger, legal entity, and business units in spreadsheet. So if you click on this, you will see that the system is downloading an Excel macro file. And typically this gets downloaded into the downloads folder of your desktop. So I'm going to show you what the blank spreadsheet looks like. So this is an example of the blank spreadsheet. You've got an instructions tab, and in the instructions tab you will actually find an embedded spreadsheet with sample data in it. Be careful about using the exact same details as the sample data. There are certain things which need to be changed. Then there is a chart of accounts, calendar, and ledger tab. There's a business units tab, there's a companies and legal entities tab, there's a tab for natural accounts, and then finally there's a financial sequences tab. So now I'm going to show you an example of a filled out spreadsheet. So this is the same spreadsheet, but it's actually filled out. So in the first tab, which is for the chart of accounts, calendar, and ledger, here in the name, you would type in the chart of accounts name. So this name would be used by the system for creating the name of the chart of accounts. And when it creates the ledgers, it's going to prefix the ledger name with this, with whatever name you have put in over here, and it is going to suffix it with the 2-character country code. The currency field is optional. The period frequency is either monthly or it can be one of the different flavors of the 445 calendar. The adjusting period could be none, or you have some choices over here. The other widely used option is once at the year end. And then fiscal year start date, you should typically put it to the first date of the previous year. Then after that, in this section, you have the names of the segments. This is something that you would type in. So the first two segments are typically company and account. These are the two mandatory segments required by Oracle. The cost center segment is actually optional, but it becomes mandatory if you implement certain modules like the fixed assets module, the expenses module. It's also required by the projects module. Then the next two segments are optional, line of business and product. And then it's a very good idea to have an intercompany segment, particularly if you are using a global chart of accounts. It's the leading practice to have an intercompany segment. In addition to this, you could have one or two future segments, which you would typically name as Future 1 and Future 2. The segment labels, the company should be marked as the primary balancing segment, and that value should be picked up from the drop-down list of values over here. The account segment should be marked as with the segment label natural account segment, and the cost center segment or department segment, typically you would label that as the cost center segment. Other optional segments don't have any label. The intercompany segment, though there is a label for it, it is highly recommended that you leave this blank. If you label the intercompany segment with intercompany segment over here, what happens is the system reuses the same value set that it used for the company value set. The same value set is used for the intercompany segment, and that creates issues in terms of setups, in terms of intercompany reconciliation reporting, and also if you want to use segment security rules, it creates issues at that time. So the Oracle General Ledger Implementation Guide actually has a section where it mentions clearly that that you should not put in the segment label intercompany. Now the sample spreadsheet embedded over here has got that intercompany segment labeled with intercompany, but it is not a good idea to actually use this in real life. Then we have so as soon as you enter all the segments over here, you need to click on add segment sheets. So after you do that, the system creates additional tabs for cost center, line of business, and whatever other segments you created, including the intercompany segment. Okay. If you had labeled the intercompany segment over there, it would not have created this intercompany segment, and it would not create a separate value set for the intercompany segment. So let's look at the other tabs. You have a business unit tab, and then you have a companies and legal entities tab. Let's talk about this tab first. So this tab lists out all the companies in this column L, and then the corresponding legal entities over here. So if you're going to type in the legal entities, you should also enter all the details of the legal entity, specifically the legal entity identifiers and registration numbers, as well as the address. You have to keep in mind that if you're entering a Canadian address, you should enter the province in the province column. Now the embedded spreadsheet has got a Canadian province in the state column, but that's not quite right. You should enter it in the province column. So I've got my companies over here and my legal entities. So the business units, I can create one or multiple business units for each country, and for each business unit there needs to be a default legal entity name. So this list should be identical to the companies over here, but I can take a default. I don't have to take all the legal entities. I need to take a default, but making sure that the names match exactly the names of the legal entities over here. Then I come to the natural account segment. The natural accounts has got a list of all the natural accounts, and each account would have one of 5 account types: asset, liability, owner's equity, revenue, and expense. But Oracle also provides a number of extended account types. So these extended account types have specific purposes in the system. Say for example, this particular code 12101 has got an extended account type asset, accounts receivable. So when the system creates a business unit and creates the different configurations for that business unit, it actually uses this particular account and marks it as the accounts receivable account. So if you go down this list, you will see the different account types being used along with the extended account types wherever applicable. Something to note over here, the retained earnings account type. Retained earnings has an account type of owner's equity with an extended account type retained earnings. So it's important to note that each of these extended account types must be used in this list, and they must be used only once. So the regular account types can be multiple, like asset is used on multiple accounts, but the extended account type, say for example asset prepayments, it should be used only once for one account. It should not be used multiple times, otherwise the system will get confused. Financial sequences are not related to the US. In the US, it is not required to create any document sequences. But in certain countries in Europe as well as in Latin America, this tab is used to set document sequences for these transactions, payables, invoices, payments, and so on. And this tab actually sets the initial value for each of these transactions. Now, since I created a cost center segment, the system created a cost center tab, and I have my list of cost centers here. I have my list of lines of business and products, and then finally the intercompany segment, it should mirror the cost center segment. So if the companies and legal entity segment, so I got my companies listed out over here. The intercompany should basically mirror the same values, except that it should have an additional value 000, none. Why? Because there would be a large number of transactions. In fact, most of the transactions would not be intercompany, right? So in those cases, you would select 000, none. So after you have filled out all the different tabs, the next task is to go to this tab and then click on validate. So once you validate it, the system goes through the entire spreadsheet and asks a simple question: do you want to review the sample report? If you say yes to that, what it does is it creates a sample report in the preview report tab. And this is what a financial statement would actually look like once the system is fully configured. And also the system creates about 7 FRS reports based on this particular accounting structure. One thing to note is that the natural accounts segment, if you go to the revenue and expense areas, there should be one parent revenue account with the extended account type, revenue, top revenues parent account. There should also be one cost of sales or cost of goods sold parent account with this particular extended account type, expense top cost of sales parent account. And then there should be one parent account which should have the extended account type, expense top operating expenses parent account. So if you have done this correctly, then the preview report would use those parents and basically create this report with different sections for revenues, cost of goods sold, and operating expenses. So that is why it is important to set those particular account values in this natural account tab. So the next step would be to create a couple of zip files from this tab. The first zip file would actually create the chart of accounts, and the second zip file would create the ledger, legal entity, and business units file. So let's do step number 2. So when you do that, it basically tries to create a zip file. So I've already created a zip file over here. So I'm going to cancel out of this. Then step number 3 is to generate the general ledger, legal entity, and business units file. So once you do that, it tries to create a file, financial common entities zip file. So I've already created this file. So I'm going to hit cancel over here. So step 1 was to validate. Step 2 was to create the chart of accounts file. And step 3 was to create the general ledger, legal entity, and business units file. And both of these are zip files, and these are the two zip files that we will actually upload to create the different chart of accounts, the ledgers, legal entities, business units, and upload the configurations into the system. So let's take a quick look at how to actually go about it. So in this spreadsheet, I have listed out the different steps that we need to take. The first step we already finished: create chart of accounts, legal entities, ledger, legal entities, and business units in spreadsheet. So we downloaded the spreadsheet, we prepared the spreadsheet. So here are some pointers. Do not use the intercompany label. Add another tab for intercompany. Add the same segment values in the company. Add same values as company in the intercompany tab. Add 000 none value in the intercompany tab. The next step we have to do is to upload the chart of accounts. So let's see how to go about that. So we'll type in upload chart of accounts, search for the task. So select the task. Click on choose file. So we are going to choose the chart of accounts file. The name of the chart of accounts file shows up over here. We click on submit. Click on OK. So then we can monitor the status of this file. So this will take a couple of minutes. I'm going to pause this video at this point. Okay, so we find that the upload enterprise structures and hierarchies, that process kicked off 2 additional programs which completed as succeeded. Now let's go back to the spreadsheet. The upload chart of accounts file, that program actually kicked off these 3 processes. The next thing that we'll do before we upload the second file, there are a few things that you should be aware of, and there are a few things that we may want to take a look at. So let's query the chart of accounts structure that was created. So how do we do that? We navigate to financials. In the setup and maintenance area, we navigate to financials. Click on reporting structures. Then we select manage chart of account structures. Click on search. Manage structures. So I know that my structure code and name is DSL, the name of my chart of accounts. So I put in DSL over here, search for it, and when it shows up, I can go and take a look at that structure. The first thing is the delimiter. The system by default, it puts a dash. There are other options available over here. The other common option is to use a dot. So if your client prefers that they want a dot as the segment separator for their accounts, this is the time to go and change it. So this needs to be done before you upload the second file. Let's take a look at each of these segments. So if you go to company segment, if I open it up, you will notice that it should have created a value set company DSL, and the label is the primary balancing segment. So just keep in mind that the company value set is company DSL. So I'm going to jump straight to the intercompany segment and take a look at what happened here. So here it has created a different value set, intercompany DSL. It did not reuse the company DSL value set because we chose not to put a segment label on this particular spreadsheet for intercompany. Another thing to note is that instead of intercompany, if we had called it, say, intercompany partner, the system would have created a label called intercompany partner segment. If that happens, then that segment is unusable for intercompany purposes. What you need to do is select that, push it to the left side, and you would see the intercompany segment label over here. You would pull that to the right side. So it is very important to make sure that the label over here is intercompany segment, exactly that. It should be intercompany segment. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of this. The account segment, let's take a look at it. So it's created a value set called account DSL, and it has put the segment label natural account segment. It is based on this spreadsheet over here, natural account segment for the account. Let's get out of this one and go to the cost center segment. So it has created a label, it has assigned the label cost center segment, because on the spreadsheet we had marked this as the cost center segment. If you look at line of business, it has put line of business segment, but this really does not have any functionality except and it can be used in BI applications later. Cancel, and then we go to product. It has put a segment label called product segment, and then we already took a look at intercompany. So the important things, a couple of things are important here. One is you can change the delimiter here from a dash to a dot if you need to, and then the intercompany segment, you may need to remove the segment label from here and then choose the intercompany segment label and then push it over here. And you need to make sure that the system has correctly created a different value set for intercompany, which is different from the company value set. Okay, now if you had made any changes, like if you have switched the delimiter or changed the intercompany segment over here, then you do need to go and basically deploy that flex field, redeploy that flex field. So in that case, what would happen? The deployment status would it would not display as deployed. Okay, you would need to highlight this and click on deploy flex field, and that would take maybe a minute. You have to make sure that the deployment status is a green tick mark over here. Okay, so basically we finished these steps. We queried the chart of accounts, updated the segment label. That's an optional step. We didn't actually do it, but I just wanted to show you where to go in if you needed to do that. We made sure that the value set on the intercompany segment is the intercompany value set and not the company value set. Change the dash to dot in the segment delimiter. This is an optional step. And then the other thing which you could do is enable a shorthand alias. So this is how you would do it. You would go to manage chart of accounts structure instances. Click on search. Okay, this time we are going to click on manage structure instances. I'm going to put DSL in the code and then edit. So once you are here, you can enable shorthand aliases right over here by clicking this checkbox. So if you do that, then you have to remember to again redeploy the flex field. While you are here, I would also like to point out that certain values you can set the defaults in this area. Like you can set the default type to constant and the value to 000. Okay, so let's go on to the next step. So if you had done that, any of those modifications, you would redeploy the accounting flex field. The next step is for geography validation. So this is required in case there are certain countries which you are implementing, which you are not able to import all the geographies, and your legal entities are actually using that particular geography. So over here, suppose you're implementing, say, Panama. Okay, and the Panama, all the geographies are not there in the system. So then basically you have to go and switch off the geography validation. So once you have done that, now is the time to actually upload the second spreadsheet. So the task is upload ledger, legal entities, and business units. So let's go and see how that is done. So we are going to search the task. Upload ledger, legal entities, and business units. Select that task. Choose the file. This time we are going to select the second file, financial common entities zip file. Click on OK and then submit. So I'm going to pause this video at this point. Okay, so now we see after about 15 to 17 minutes that the system has created or generated a large number of these jobs, and they all finished as with the status succeeded. The last job that we are actually looking for is this generate financial reports and account groups. So what this last job does is it creates a number of financial statements based on the chart of accounts structure that we created. To give you a quick preview of those reports, you would need to log into the BI catalog. And once you have navigated to that area, under shared folders, custom financials, you would see all the reports that the system created. So the system created DSL AU for Australia. It created consolidated income statement, profit and loss statement by cost center, rolling monthly income statement, rolling quarterly income statement, trial balance by entered currency, trial balance by ledger currency. And then it has created the same set of reports for the Canadian ledger, then the Great Britain ledger, for the India ledger, and then finally for the US ledger. So for each ledger, the system creates 7 reports. So these reports, with a few modifications, they can be used out of the box. That was the first thing I wanted to show you. Then after that, let's take a look at the key setups that the system created. So if I go to my setup and maintenance and then navigate to financials, so let's take a look at a few key setups. So if I go to general ledger and look at my primary ledgers, it has created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ledgers, one for each of these countries. So I had US, Canada, UK, Australia, and India. So here it has created 5 ledgers, one for each country. Now it would have also created the ledger options. So if I go to specify ledger options and then select and add, and suppose I want to take a look at the US ledger, I select the US ledger, click on save and close, and then it would take me to the ledger options for that ledger. So like this, the system would create a number of setups. So these are the ledger options for the US ledger. The same would be created for each of the other primary ledgers. One thing to note is that the system creates only primary ledgers. It does not create secondary or reporting currency ledgers. Those ledgers you would have to create manually. So if I go to my financial reporting structures, take a look at the calendar that it created, I would see a calendar with the same chart of accounts name, DSL. So it started my accounting period from 2018. Now, in a real implementation, you would add a few years over here. Let's also take a look at the intercompany accounting balancing rules. So if I stay on financials and navigate to intercompany, so at a minimum, it should create the intercompany balancing rules. So if I select manage intercompany balancing rules and then go to the chart of accounts rules, you would see that it has created right over here two intercompany balancing rules based on the intercompany account that I had specified in the rapid implementation spreadsheet. It also creates the business units. So if I go to manage business unit, it would have created 5 or as many business units as I had specified over here. Okay, so if I search for USA BU, so it created 2 business units, A and B, based on these 2 setups, these 2 records over here. If I click inside one of them, you would see the business unit definition. Now, something to note is that there are still a large number of setups that need to be done. The system assumes certain best practices and creates some of the setups based on the rapid implementation spreadsheet, but there would still be a large number of setups that need to be completed. So what I'm going to do is I have a separate presentation which has got a lot of detail as to each of the setups that the system creates. So I'm going to append that a link to that presentation on SlideShare in the reference in the notes to this particular video. So that brings me to pretty much to the end of this video. So this has been an attempt to explain the rapid implementation process with a particular focus on a few pitfalls, particularly relating to the intercompany segment. It is a common mistake to basically put the intercompany segment label over here, and that actually causes issues. So the purpose of this video was not only to walk you through the steps, but also point out some best practices and some of the common mistakes to avoid. So I hope this has been helpful, and thanks a lot for watching.